It is 7:41 p.m. on March 14th, 2023. I'm going to begin to read a formal text from Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism by V.I. Lenin, beginning with page 11. During the last 15 to 20 years, especially since the Spanish-American War, 1898, and the Anglo-Boer War, 1899 to 1902, the economic and also the political literature of the two hemispheres has more and more often adopted the term imperialism in order to describe the present era. In 1902, a book by the English economist J.A. Hobson, Imperialism, was published in London and New York. This author, whose point of view is that of bourgeois social reformism and pacifism, which in essence is identical with the present point of view of the ex-Marxist K. Kautsky, gives a very good and comprehensive description of the principal specific economic and political features of imperialism. In 1910, there appeared in Vienna the work of the Austrian Marxist Rudolf Hilferding, Finance Capital, Russian edition, Moscow, 1912. In spite of the mistake the author commits on the theory of money, and in spite of a certain inclination on his part to reconcile Marxism with opportunism, this work gives a very valuable theoretical analysis of the latest phase of capitalist development, the subtitle of the book. Indeed, what has been said of imperialism during the last few years, especially in an enormous number of magazine and newspaper articles, and also in the resolutions, for example, of the Chemnitz and Basel Congresses, which took place in the autumn of 1912, has scarcely gone beyond the ideas expounded, or more exactly, summed up by the two writers mentioned above. Later on, we shall try to show briefly, and as simply as possible, the connection and relationships between the principal economic features of imperialism. We shall not be able to deal with non-economic aspects of the question, however much they deserve to be dealt with. We have put references to literature and other notes which perhaps would not interest all readers at the end of this pamphlet. Part 1. Concentration of production and monopolies. The enormous growth of industry and the remarkably rapid process of concentration of production and ever larger enterprises are one of the most characteristic features of capitalism. Modern censuses of production give most complete and most exact data on this process. In Germany, for example, out of every 1,000 industrial enterprises, large enterprises, i.e., those employing more than 50 workers, numbered 3 in 1882, 6 in 1895, and 9 in 1907. And out of every 100 workers employed, this group of enterprises employed 22, 30, and 37 respectively. Concentration of production, however, is much more intense than the concentration of workers, since labor in the large enterprises is much more productive. This is shown by the figures on steam engines and electric motors. If we take what in Germany is called industry in the broad sense of the term, that is, including commerce, transport, etc., we get the following picture. Large-scale enterprises, 30,588 out of a total of 3,265,623. That is to say, 0.9%. These enterprises employ 5,700,000 workers out of a total of 14,400,000, i.e., 39.4%. They use 6,600,000 steam horsepower out of a total of 8,800,000, i.e., 75.3%. and 1,200,000 kilowatts of electricity out of a total of 1,500,000, i.e., 77.2%. Less than 1/100th of the total enterprises utilize more than 3/4 of the total steam and electric power. 2,970,000 small enterprises employing up to 5 workers, constituting 91% of the total, utilize only 7% of the total steam and electric power. Tens of thousands of huge enterprises are everything. Millions of small ones are nothing. In 1907, there were in Germany 586 establishments employing 1,000 and more workers, nearly 1/10, 1,380,000 of the total number of workers employed in industry, and they utilize almost 1/3, 32% of the total steam and electric power. As we shall see, money capital and the banks make the superiority of a handful of the largest enterprises still more overwhelming, in the most literal sense of the word, i.e., millions of small, medium, and even some big masters are in fact in complete subjection to hundreds of millionaire financiers. In another advanced country of modern capitalism, the United States of America, the growth of the concentration of production is still greater. Here, statistics single out industry in a narrow sense of the word and group enterprises according to the value of their annual output. In 1904, large-scale enterprises with an output of $1 million and over-numbered 1,900 out of 216,180, i.e., 0.9%. These employed 1,400,000 workers out of 5,500,000, i.e., 25.6%, and their output amounted to $5,600,000,000 out of $14,800,000,000, i.e., 38%. 5 years later, in 1909, the corresponding figures were 3,060 enterprises out of 268,491, i.e., 1.1%, employing 2 million workers out of 6,600,000, i.e., 30.5%, with an output of $9 billion out of $20,700,000,000, i.e., 43.8%. Almost half the total production of all the enterprises of the country was carried on by 1/100th part of these enterprises. These 3,000 giant enterprises embrace 258 branches of industry. From this, it can be seen that, at a certain stage of its development, concentration itself, as it were, leads right up to monopoly. For a score or so of giant enterprises can easily arrive at an agreement, while, on the other hand, the hindrance to competition, the tendency toward monopoly, arises from the very dimensions of the enterprises. This transformation of competition into monopoly is one of the most important, if not the most important, phenomena of modern capitalist economy, and we must deal with it in greater detail. But first, we must clear up one possible misunderstanding. American statistics say 3,000 giant enterprises and 250 branches of industry, as if there were only a dozen enterprises of the largest scale for each branch of industry. But this is not the case. Not in every branch of industry are there large-scale enterprises. And moreover, a very important feature of capitalism in its highest stage of development is so-called combination of production. That is to say, the grouping in a single enterprise of different branches of industry, which either represent the consecutive stages in the processing of raw materials, for example, the smelting of iron ore into pig iron, the conversion of pig iron into steel, and then perhaps the manufacture of steel goods, or are auxiliary to one another. For example, the utilization of scrap or of byproducts, the manufacture of packing materials, etc. Combination, writes Hilferding, levels out the fluctuations of trade and therefore assures to the combined enterprises a more stable rate of profit. Second, combination has the effect of eliminating trade. Thirdly, it has the effect of rendering possible technical improvements and consequently the acquisition of super profits over and above those obtained by the pure, i.e., combined enterprises. Fourthly, it strengthens the position of the combined enterprises compared with that of pure enterprises, strengthens them in the competition struggle in periods of serious depression, when the fall in prices of raw materials does not keep pace with the fall in prices of manufactured goods. The German bourgeois economist Hayman, who has written a book especially on mixed, that is, combined enterprises in the German iron industry, says, pure enterprises perish. They are crushed between the high price of raw material and the low price of the finished product. Thus, we get the following picture. There remains, on the one hand, the big coal companies producing millions of tons yearly, strongly organized in the coal syndicate, and on the other, the big steel plants, closely allied to the coal mines, having their own steel syndicate. These giant enterprises, producing 400,000 tons of steel per annum, with a tremendous output of ore and coal, and producing finished steel goods, employing 10,000 workers quartered in company houses, and sometimes owning their own railways and ports, are the typical representatives of the German iron and steel industry. And concentration goes on further and further. Individual enterprises are becoming larger and larger. An ever-increasing number of enterprises in one or in several different industries join together in giant enterprises backed up and directed by a half a dozen in big Berlin banks. In relation to the German mining industry, the truth of the teachings of Karl Marx on concentration is definitely proved. True, this applies to a country where industry is protected by tariffs and freight rates. The German mining industry is ripe for expropriation. Such is the conclusion which a conscientious bourgeois economist, and such are the exception, had to arrive at. It must be noted that he seems to place Germany in a special category because her industries are protected by high tariffs. But this circumstance could only accelerate concentration and the formation of monopolist manufacturers as combines, cartels, syndicates, etc. It is extremely important to note that in free trade England, concentration also leads to monopoly, although somewhat later and perhaps in another form. Professor Herman Levy, in his special work of research entitled Monopolies, Cartels, and Trusts, based on data on British economic development, writes as follows. In Great Britain, it is the size of the enterprise and its high technical level which harbor a monopolistic tendency. This, for one thing, is due to the great investment of capital per enterprise, which gives rise to increasing demands for new capital for the new enterprises and thereby renders their launching more difficult. Moreover, and this seems to us to be the most important point, every new enterprise that wants to keep pace with the gigantic enterprises that have been formed by concentration would here produce such an enormous quantity of surplus goods that it could dispose of them only by being able to sell them profitably as a result of an enormous increase in demand. Otherwise, this surplus would force prices down to a level that would be unprofitable both for the new enterprise and for the monopoly combines. In England, unlike other countries where protective tariffs facilitate the formation of cartels, monopolist alliances of entrepreneurs, cartels, and trusts arise in the majority of cases only when the number of the chief competing enterprises is reduced to a couple or a dozen or so. Here, the influence of the concentration movement on the formation of large industrial monopolies as a whole sphere of industry stands out with crystal clarity. Half a century ago, when Marx was writing Capital, free competition appeared to the overwhelming majority of economists as a natural law. Official science tried, by a conspiracy of silence, to kill the works of Marx, who, by a theoretical and historical analysis of capitalism, proved that free competition gives rise to the concentration of production, which in turn, at a certain stage of development, leads to monopoly. Today, monopoly has become a fact. The economists are writing mountains of books in which they describe the diverse manifestations of monopoly, and continue to declare in chorus that Marxism is refuted. But facts are stubborn things, as the English proverbs say, and they have to be reckoned with whether we like it or not. The facts show the differences between capitalist countries, e.g. in the matter of protection or free trade, only give rise to insignificant variations in the form of monopolies or in the moment of their appearance, and that the rise of monopolies as a result of the concentration of production is a general and fundamental law of the present stage of development of capitalism. We're going to stop at the middle of page 18.